Coming up today, 11 MERS patients are in critical condition as a pregnant woman is confirmed to have the virus. Despite fears, a visiting team of experts from the WHO says schools should reopen as there's no threat to students. President Park Geun-hye puts her scheduled visit to the US on hold as part of efforts to reassure the public the government is doing all it can to contain the MERS outbreak. Plus, there are expectations the Bank of Korea will cut its benchmark rate for June to a new record low of 1.5%. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello to our viewers around the world. It's 6 a.m. on Thursday, June 11th here in Seoul. Thanks, as always, for joining us. I'm Mark Broome. We start with the latest on the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, or MERS, outbreak in Korea. A pregnant woman who was suspected of having the virus tested positive on Thursday after a final round of testing. This marks the first case of a pregnant woman being infected with MERS in Korea. The woman, in her 40s, is known to have contracted the virus after accompanying her mother-in-law to the emergency room of the Samsung Medical Center in southern Seoul late last month. The hospital is where a whopping 47 cases, or nearly half of the country's total confirmed cases, were reported. Despite the rising number of patients and growing public fear, the WHO team currently studying the MERS outbreak in Korea has recommended schools be reopened. It says all MERS cases have occurred within hospitals, not schools. However, more than 2,700 preschools and elementary schools will remain closed for the remainder of the week, mostly due to demands from parents. There are now 109 confirmed MERS cases in Korea, while more than 3,400 people are in quarantine. 9 people have died, raising the fatality rate to slightly over 8% now. There is some encouraging news, though. One MERS patient was sent home on Wednesday, meaning 4 people have now made full recoveries. Also, more than 70 Koreans who were isolated in China after coming into contact with a Korean confirmed traveller are said to be released soon, as they have not shown any symptoms after the incubation period of 14 days. President Park Geun-hye has postponed her planned trip to the United States in response to growing public anxiety over the MERS outbreak. Seoul and Washington have agreed to figure out a new date for their summit talks as quickly as possible. Our KyoAhn reports.
In a statement read by her press secretary on Wednesday, President Park Geun-hye said she has decided to postpone her U.S. visit, with public safety topping her priority list.
President Park has decided to postpone her U.S. trip to ensure public safety, including a prompt eradication of the MERS virus.
Members of both political parties and the general public have expressed concerns about the president's potential absence in the midst of the MERS scare, especially when the outbreak is expected to hit a critical turning point in the coming days. The Park administration has come under fire for its insufficient initial response to the outbreak, and that has caused the president's approval ratings to drop by as much as 6 percentage points. The ruling Saenuri party said it respects the president's decision, saying she took into account the current social and economic sentiment. The main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy said President Park made the right decision to give the situation several more days to determine whether the outbreak can be managed. In a likely response to concerns about the possible diplomatic consequences of delaying the trip, Korea's presidential office said Seoul and Washington have agreed to reschedule President Park's visit as soon as possible. With North Korea's continued security threats and rising questions about South Korea's diplomatic voice in Northeast Asia, President Park's U.S. trip will be pivotal to guiding her foreign policy forward. And the speed with which the trip is rescheduled will be a testament to the strength of the alliance between Seoul and Washington. 최유선, Arirang News.
Now, following President Park Geun-hye's decision to postpone her visit to the US, the White House has said that it looks forward to receiving her at a convenient time in the future. Spokesperson for the US National Security Council, Ali Baski, said Washington will work closely with Seoul to provide support to cope with the MERS outbreak in Korea. US foreign policy experts on the Korean Peninsula also said they understood President Park's decision. They expressed hope the summit will be held soon to discuss bilateral issues, including the US-Korea alliance and the critical role it plays in providing regional stability and security. There's growing speculation Korea's central bank may cut its benchmark interest rate for June this morning. The damaging effect of the MERS outbreak on domestic demand has prompted analysts to suggest the Bank of Korea may reduce the key rate from its current record low of 1.75%. Watchers also say the BOK will be keen to support growth and strengthen economic fundamentals before the US Federal Reserve hikes interest rates in the coming months. Now, 8 of 15 economists surveyed by Bloomberg predict the BOK will cut the rate by 25 basis points to 1.5%. The announcement will be made around 10 a.m. Korea time this morning, and we will bring you the details during our next newscast at noon. The three-day confirmation hearing for Prime Minister nominee Hwang KyoAhn came to an end on Wednesday, but the jury's still out on whether he'll win the National Assembly's approval. Our Ji Myung-gil has more.
The three-day grilling session came to an end on Wednesday with uncertainty looming over Prime Minister nominee Hwang KyoAhn's parliamentary approval.
We wanted our Prime Minister nominee to confront and clarify all the allegations that surrounded him and restart as a clean Prime Minister. Still, many problems are unexplained.
Hwang has been heading the Ministry of Justice since President Park Geun-hye took office in early 2013. Lawmakers from the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy accused the prosecutor turned justice minister of ethical lapses during his public career, specifically receiving a hefty paycheck for facilitating a pardon using his prosecutorial connections in 2012, when he was working with a law firm before becoming justice minister. Hwang also defended himself against accusations of dodging military service in 1980, claiming he had a skin disease that made him unfit for active duty. However, the ruling's Henry Party urged his swift confirmation, pushing to hold a vote this week.
Our hearing committee must evaluate the progress report as quickly as possible, as it's the final stage of the parliamentary procedures.
Hwang said if given the opportunity, he would pursue economic stability and remove unnecessary regulations.
If I get the chance to work as a country's Prime Minister, I will do my best to push the country forward by creating harmony through better communication with the people.
The MPAD will hold a general meeting of its lawmakers on Thursday to discuss the nominee's parliamentary approval. Ji Myung-gil, Arirang News.
The United States is sending an extra 450 troops to Iraq to train Sunni tribal fighters in the country in an effort to reclaim territory lost to the Islamic State group. The White House says the additional military trainers will push the total American troop presence in Iraq to roughly 3,600. The new troops will be stationed in Anbar province in a strategically important area between the Islamic State-held cities of Ramadi and Fallujah. The new troops are set to arrive as early as this summer. The US government also announced it will set up an $800 million fund handled by the UN to help local communities in Iraq stabilize once IS militants have been driven out. The newly appointed chief of US Pacific Command has labeled North Korea a rogue nation. Admiral Harris made the comment on Wednesday during a visit to the South Korean Navy's 2nd Fleet Command in Pyeongtaek, south of Seoul. Harris paid tribute to the 46 South Korean sailors killed in North Korea's 2010 torpedo attack on the Cheonan naval vessel, calling the incident an example of the dangerous and unpredictable nature of the North Korean leadership. He also described Kim Jong-un as an arrogant leader. whose regime is discredited by the entire world, adding that Washington remains vigilant in the face of Pyongyang's continued provocations and steadfast in its commitment to South Korea. South Korea and Japan will meet today to discuss ways to address Tokyo's wartime sexual enslavement of Korean women. Seoul's foreign ministry says senior officials from the two sides will meet in Tokyo on this Thursday. This will be their 8th such meeting on this highly emotive issue for Korea. More than 200,000 women, mostly Koreans, were forced to serve the Japanese military during Japan's colonial rule of Korea in the early 1900s and throughout World War II. The talks come as both countries are seeking a breakthrough in their deeply frayed relations ahead of the 50th anniversary of the normalization of their bilateral ties on June 22nd. Now, some encouraging news for Korea on the labour front. Job creation hit a 5-month high last month, but there's a bumpy road ahead with the MERS outbreak posing some obstacles. Geunhye reports.
Almost 380,000 more people had a job in May than in the same month a year ago. That's the biggest on-year increase in 5 months. Both the employment and unemployment rates went up slightly from last year, along with the overall growth in Korea's working population. Statistics Korea said Wednesday the total number of people in work last month stood at slightly under 26.2 million, as more workers were hired in the service and manufacturing sectors, with those in food and lodging doing especially well. The agency attributes the on-year jump to the lower base rate in May last year, coming a month after the Seoul ferry sinking, and it attributes the on-month jump to the warm, dry weather as the employment sector was hit hard by rainy conditions last month. There is some concern, however, that the improvement may not extend into next month.
Increased spending on leisure and culture led to improvements in the related sectors, but there's a big chance that there will be a downturn in June due to the effects of the MERS virus.
Experts say another concern is the high youth unemployment rate, which is around 2.5 times higher than the overall jobless rate. Geunhye, Arirang News.
Now, staying with economic news, and Korea has become a fertile ground for startups in recent years, with more and more young Koreans taking a shot at opening their own business. Some have gone on to great things, but for every small firm that is flourishing, there are several struggling to make much headway at all. Shin Se-min reports.
It's something many people have considered at least once.
I would like to be my own boss sometime in the future. Since I won't have a steady income after retirement, I'm thinking of opening my own business.
Lee Kyung-jae had similar thoughts before he opened his own pub back in 2013. Although he's since expanded the business and opened a second branch, he says it took longer than expected to get started.
I studied for years before opening my own business. First cooking, and then startups. Knowing that many new businesses don't succeed, I had to be ready.
Some 6 million Koreans call themselves boss. Add to that the number of people who are currently preparing to start their own business, and the number jumps to well over 10 million. It's a combination of young job seekers and baby boomers over 50 who are coming up on their retirement and looking for new sources of income. But compared to other countries, the success stories are few. More than 60% of startups in Luxembourg and Australia survive after the 3-year mark. In Korea, that number is closer to 40%. The low success rate is largely because most startups have trouble making enough money to balance out their overhead costs. But money isn't the only stumbling block. Many startups are in service sectors like real estate, food, and lodging, resulting in market saturation and eventually forcing many to shut down. Experts say new owners should look into more promising sectors like IT, but that comes with a warning.
Tech businesses aren't for everyone and are difficult for older people to approach, so more support for investment opportunities and workshops is needed.
Another tip for aspiring entrepreneurs? Be careful about jumping in too quickly. because starting a business is harder than it may seem and the successes are few. 신사민, Arirang News.
Well, those are the stories we're following this Thursday morning here in Seoul. For more of the latest, don't forget to check out our website, arirang.co.kr/news. Enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye.